The Dancing Plague of 1518. Death by dancing. It began with a single woman in the blazing summer of July 1518 in the bustling Alsatian city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire. A woman stepped out into the narrow cobbled streets and began to dance. No music played. No festival was held. There was no wedding, no market parade, no celebration of saints. And yet she moved, wildly, feverishly, spinning and twirling beneath the heavy sun, her bare feet slapping against the stone until the skin broke. Her name was Frau Trophäa, and what began as one woman's inexplicable dance would soon become one of the strangest outbreaks in recorded history. A frenzy that left dozens dead, baffled priests, and terrified physicians in its wake. They would call it the Dancing Plague. A plague without a germ, a madness without a cause. And to this day, more than 500 years later, it remains one of history's most haunting enigmas, where faith, fear, and despair collided in a grim ballet of death. To understand the plague, we must first walk the streets of Strasbourg as it was in 1518. This was no quiet medieval village. Strasbourg was one of the great cities of the Rhine, pulsing with trade and religion. Tall gabled houses leaned over narrow lanes. Guild banners hung from the windows. Church bells marked the hours like a divine metronome. The air smelled of grain, river mud, and horse dung. Markets were loud with merchants selling spices from Venice, furs from the north, and wine from the surrounding countryside. But beneath that noise, there was tension, a quiet, constant ache that throbbed through the city's people. The year 1518 was a time of hardship. Harvests had failed. Bread prices had soared. And as always in the Middle Ages, when hunger rose, so too did superstition. The people of Strasbourg lived under the heavy weight of the church, of sin and punishment, of pestilence and penance. They feared that every misfortune, floods, storms, plague, was divine wrath made visible. In their hearts, they carried guilt, the idea that they perhaps had sinned too much or prayed too little, that God's anger could manifest not just in the skies above, but in their very bodies. So when Frau Trophäa began to dance, some believed she was possessed, others thought she was cursed, and some whispered, half in fear, half in awe, that she was chosen, the first dancer. Frau Trophäa's dance lasted for days. Eyewitnesses claimed she neither ate nor slept. She would collapse from exhaustion, her body trembling, only to rise again and continue her frantic movements. No one knew why. Her husband begged her to stop, then cursed her, then fled the house entirely, unable to watch his wife destroy herself. Neighbors gathered to stare, horrified and fascinated. And as the days passed, something even stranger happened. Other people began to join her, first a handful, then dozens. Within a week, the streets of Strasbourg were filled with dancers, men and women, young and old, swaying and convulsing as if to music only they could hear. The chroniclers wrote that they danced day and night without rest, that their feet bled, that some screamed prayers while others cursed heaven, that many collapsed, their bodies shaking with fever. And yet the dance went on. Within a month, more than 400 people were reported to have been seized by the dance. At first, the city council treated it as a curiosity, another of the Lord's mysterious punishments. But when people began dying from exhaustion, strokes, and heart attacks, panic spread. The city's physicians were summoned. Their conclusion? Not demonic possession, but hot blood. They believed the afflicted suffered from an imbalance of humors. a fever of the spirit that could only be cured by more dancing. And so, in a decision that would seem insane to us now, the authorities encouraged the dance. They cleared out guild halls, built wooden stages, and even hired musicians to help the afflicted expel their sickness. Imagine that sight for a moment, the sound of drums echoing through the narrow streets, the smell of sweat and blood and incense mixing in the summer heat, the desperate faces of the dancers spinning under the cathedral's shadow. Priests watched in horror, citizens prayed, and the dancers danced until their bodies simply gave out. For weeks, the city pulsed with movement. Chroniclers describe mothers leaving their infants to join the frenzy, merchants abandoning their stalls, even priests and nuns, overcome by what they believed to be divine ecstasy, joining the dance. One witness wrote that they danced until their bones cracked and they fell dead. Another described a woman whose shoes filled with blood, but who continued, eyes rolled back, lips mouthing silent prayers. In modern terms, this sounds impossible. How could so many people lose control of their own bodies? Yet, we've seen similar waves of hysteria across history. Medieval nuns meowing like cats in convents, villagers fainting en masse during sermons. Even during wartime, groups of soldiers struck by trembling fits with no physical cause. The dancing plague was, perhaps, the most spectacular outbreak of this kind, a mass psychogenic illness born of faith, fear, and famine. But to the people of 1518, it was the work of God or the devil. When dozens had died and the city's stages ran red with blood, the authorities reversed their decision. The church now declared the dance the work of Saint Vitus, a 4th century martyr whose spirit was believed to curse sinners with uncontrollable dancing. To break the curse, the city's priests gathered the afflicted and led them, barefoot and trembling, to the shrine of Saint Vitus in the nearby mountains. There they performed rituals of purification. Holy water was sprinkled, crosses were raised, masses were sung to drive out the madness. Some returned cured, others never came back, and as quickly as it had begun, the dancing stopped. By September, the streets of Strasbourg were silent again. No more music, no more frenzy, only exhaustion, mourning, and fear. What really happened? Centuries later, historians, psychologists, and scientists have tried to understand what caused the dancing plague. Some argue it was ergot poisoning, caused by a hallucinogenic fungus that grows on damp rocks, the same fungus that can trigger convulsions and hallucinations. It's a neat theory, but it fails to explain the long duration and organized movement. People poisoned by ergot can barely stand, much less dance for days. Others believe it was mass hysteria, a collective psychological reaction to stress and despair. And indeed, the timing makes sense. The people of Strasbourg were starving, the Rhine had flooded, disease stalked the streets, faith was cracking under the weight of suffering. In such times, the mind can rebel against the body, and perhaps, for the citizens of Strasbourg, the dance was both a release and a surrender, a way to give in to madness when the world itself no longer made sense. Some scholars go deeper still, suggesting that the dance was an unconscious act of protest, especially by women, against their oppression and poverty. After all, most of the first dancers were women, women bound by duty, silence, and guilt. Women who perhaps found a dark liberation in movement, even as it destroyed them. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the rhythmic slapping of bare feet on stone, the heavy breath of hundreds moving in unison, the distant toll of church bells, the murmurs of prayers drowned by the rising hum of drums and pipes. Imagine being there, a city overcome by motion, every alley trembling with feverish life, the air thick with dust and incense, the faces, half in ecstasy, half in agony, bodies collapsing, others taking their place. There's something both horrifying and heartbreakingly human about it, that even in their madness, they moved together, as if the dance connected them, across despair, across fear, across faith. It was a tragedy, yes, but also a reflection of something buried deep within us, the desire to escape pain, even if it means surrendering to it completely. The dancing plague of 1518 was not unique. Other outbreaks of dancing mania had been recorded in the Middle Ages, in Aachen, in Cologne, in Metz, but Strasbourg's was the most infamous and the last of such scale. After it ended, the city's leaders grew cautious. Public gatherings were restricted. Music was banned for months. And chroniclers noted that the people feared the dance as they feared death. But legends grew. In art, the image of the dancing death became a symbol of human fragility. The dance macabre, the dance of death. Paintings showed skeletons leading kings and peasants alike in a grim procession, a reminder that no one escapes mortality. Perhaps the real tragedy of 1518 was not the deaths themselves, but the reason behind them, the collective despair of a society stretched to its breaking point. The people of Strasbourg did not dance for joy. They danced because they had no other way left to scream. Reflections through time. Today, historians and psychologists look back on the dancing plague with curiosity and a shiver of recognition. We may not dance ourselves to death anymore, but collective hysteria still finds its ways into modern life. We see it in online mobs, in political panics, in waves of moral outrage and fear that spread faster than reason. The same forces that drove the people of Strasbourg to the streets: stress, hopelessness, belief, contagion of emotion, still exist, only wearing new masks. The human mind has always been fragile, especially when isolated in fear. And when fear spreads, it can make entire societies move to a rhythm of madness. So when we read of Frau Trophäa spinning in the street, her bloodied feet pounding the stone, perhaps we should not see her as a relic of superstition, but as a mirror, a reflection of what happens when pain seeks a voice and finds it in motion. By the time the leaves began to turn that year, the fever had burned itself out. The markets reopened. The guilds resumed their trade. But something in Strasbourg had changed. The people had seen what despair could do, how it could turn prayer into mania and devotion into death. Frau Trophäa's name faded into history, her grave unmarked, her story passed on only in whispers and records. But her dance, her terrible, magnificent dance, has never been forgotten. Every age has its own plagues. Some kill the body, others infect the mind. And in 1518, Strasbourg's plague was both. They danced to survive, they danced to die. And when the music finally stopped, the silence that followed was almost sacred. And so ends one of history's strangest and most haunting chapters. The dancing plague of 1518, death by dancing, a reminder that madness, faith, and fear often share the same stage, and that sometimes the line between salvation and destruction is as thin as the sound of footsteps on a stone street. If you enjoyed this dark tale from history, step closer and stay a while. There are more shadows waiting to be explored. stories of obsession, tragedy, and the hidden corners of the human heart. Until next time, this is Mad Historian, inviting you to keep your candles lit and your curiosity burning.